February 2019, I finally did something I had dreamed about since I was a kid, flipping through magazines in my dad's garage on lazy afternoons. The car amid all its dust and neglect was a 1967 Chevrolet Impala 4-door, sitting under a thin layer of grime at a local auction. The white paint had faded, the chrome was dulled, but I could see the beauty hiding beneath it all. To me, it wasn't just an old car. It was a canvas waiting to be restored, a piece of history I could breathe life into with my own hands. I remember the first time I laid my hands on the hood, tracing the curves of its body. A shiver ran down my spine. Every dent, every scratch, every patch of rust told a story, and I was determined to write the next chapter. This car would be mine, not just a ride, but a project, a challenge, and a testament to patience and passion. Buying it wasn't cheap. The auction ended at a price that made my heart race and my bank account groan. Over $6,000 for the car, plus another $5,000 for parts and initial services. I was officially over my head, financially and emotionally, but I didn't care. This was my dream, my passion, my sanctuary. When I brought it home, the first thing I did was survey the space. A few months earlier, I'd bought my first house, a charming little place with about 2.5 acres and a garage wide enough for 2.5 cars. It wasn't huge, but it was perfect for my plan, or so I thought. I divided the garage into 2 zones, one for the body, one for the chassis and engine. Boxes of parts and tools quickly filled every available surface. Within the first week, the garage was no longer just a place to park, had become a museum of obsession. Brake kits, engines, refurbished interiors lined the walls. The floor was an organized chaos of wrenches, screwdrivers, and rags carrying a faint scent of engine oil. I spent hours just sitting in that garage, running through the next tasks in my head. Every day was a mix of excitement and anxiety. Could I make this lady run again? Could I restore her to her former glory? Every problem solved, every part cleaned or installed, gave me a tiny, quiet pride. It was almost meditative, therapeutic. Even this was my world, and nothing else mattered when I was there. I started documenting everything from day one. Before and after photos of the engine, invoices for every part, notes on time spent repairing everything, meticulously organized. I wanted to ensure this wasn't just a car. It was a project, an investment, and, if needed, evidence of the blood, sweat, and money I'd poured into it. I had no idea how important that documentation would become, but at the time, it just felt right. Life outside the garage moved slowly compared to the intensity inside. I had a small, local job, enough to keep busy, but not too stressful, and in the evenings, I retreated to the garage as my sanctuary. The world could wait. I had my Impala, and that was all that mattered. Then came a moment I never anticipated. My girlfriend moved in. She had visited occasionally, of course, but one day she decided to stay for good. I welcomed it, of course, but the transition was anything but smooth. Almost immediately, small tensions began to surface. She didn't understand the garage, didn't understand why I needed 2 separate zones, and certainly didn't see the beauty in the half-disassembled car I was obsessing over. "It's just a car," she said, one evening while I was cleaning the chassis. Her voice wasn't harsh, but there was an underlying frustration. "Why do you need so much space for that thing?" I tried to explain, gently, calmly, keeping my irritation in check. "It's not just a car," I said. "This is a project. I've restored every detail, every bolt, every component. It's not just for parking. It's about bringing it back to life. She nodded, but I could tell the conversation wasn't over in her mind. Over the next few weeks, small changes emerged. The garage, my sacred space, became a point of contention. She sighed when she walked past, asked when I would be done, or suggested moving things out or into storage. Not realizing what she was really asking, I tried to keep my frustration in check. I really did. I told myself this was just a phase she was adjusting. Once she saw the car running, she'd understand. But the small tensions were unavoidable. Every time I tightened a bolt or cleaned a part, there was a nagging worry in the back of my mind. She didn't see it the way I did, and maybe she never would. Still, the first few months brought quiet joy. Progress was happening. The chassis was ready to be reassembled, the body prepped for paint. Every small victory felt like hearing the car breathe again. There was a rhythm: wake, work, come home, repair, document, repeat, and I cherished it. Evenings in the garage became a form of meditation, a place to escape the world. I played old rock records, the sound of electric guitars mingling with the clang of metal. The smell of oil and grease became comforting, almost like a perfume telling me, "You're doing this right. This is your world." But beneath all that joy, I knew the tension with her was a storm brewing. She didn't share the passion, and every day that lack of understanding felt like a wedge, small but persistent. I saw it in her eyes when she looked at the garage, in her subtle comments about the space and the mess, in the quiet annoyance whenever I mentioned the car. By spring, I had made significant progress. The chassis was ready, the body repaired, where it mattered most, and I was on the verge of something remarkable. The car would live again under my hands. But excitement now mixed with anxiety. I couldn't shake the thought that the sanctuary I had poured my heart into could also be the source of conflict in my relationship, and that, I realized, was when the real story began. The Impala was no longer just a car. It had become a symbol of everything I cared about, everything I had worked for, and everything that could be threatened by someone who didn't even realize it. I had no idea then the storm was coming faster than I expected. It wasn't mechanical failure. It wasn't budget trouble. It was human, and it was going to hit me in ways no amount of money, effort, or preparation could prevent. The first few weeks after she moved in were manageable. I tried to stay calm and patient, telling myself this was just an adjustment phase. I had my Impala, my job, and my garage there, place where I felt most like myself. But it didn't take long for the differences in how we viewed life to start surfacing. One Friday evening, I was checking the car's drivetrain when she walked into the garage, hands on her hips, eyes full of skepticism. "Are you sure you need all this stuff? It looks like a battlefield in here," she said, her irritation barely hidden. I set the drivetrain down, wiped my hands on a rag, and took a deep breath. I know it's messy, but this is my workspace. I'm restoring the car. Every part has a reason to be here. I can't clean up constantly while I'm working. She furrowed her brow, pacing the garage and peering into every box of parts. "You spend way too much time on this car. Don't you remember we live together now? You're not just living alone anymore." Her words felt like little knives, pricking at my excitement. I tried to explain, but her tone was loaded with doubt and invisible pressure. I realized that while this car was a crucial part of my life, all she saw was chaos and distraction. The next day, she suggested, "Why don't you move some of these boxes out to the barn? You could work there, and I'd have space for my things. I froze. The barn. You want me to move the car and chassis out there? This is a lifetime's work. I can't just relocate everything on a whim. She gave a faint, dismissive laugh, as if she didn't understand why I was upset. You're overreacting. It's just an old car. I knew this was only the beginning. Those words made me feel isolated. The Impala wasn't just a car, it was a symbol of effort and passion. And now it seemed like all of that was being dismissed. I started noticing every gesture, every look, every small comment. Every time she entered the garage, I felt a subtle judgment, as if anything I did was wrong. Tension built up day by day. I spent hours in the garage, painstakingly working on every bolt, every engine part, but whenever she walked by, I heard the exasperated sighs. I tried to adjust, cleaned up a bit, rearranged boxes, but each attempt felt like losing a piece of freedom, disrupting the rhythm I once loved. One day, while polishing a set of rims, she suddenly walked in and touched one I had just cleaned. Why are you being so meticulous? Why not just get it done faster? I stepped back, inhaled deeply, and fought the rising anger. I can't rush this. It's a classic car, every part matters. If you really understood, you wouldn't say that. She gave a dry laugh, said nothing more, just looked at me and walked out. I stood there, staring at the gleaming rim, feeling both hurt and frustrated. I realized this wasn't just about the car anymore. It was about values and passion. Day after day, small conflicts kept happening. She started making increasingly unreasonable requests. Move boxes, clear out parts, even suggesting selling some items to free up space. Each time I heard that, my chest tightened. This was years of work, and to her, it was trivial. I began feeling isolated even when she was around. The garage was no longer sacred, it had become a mental battlefield. Helplessness crept in whenever I thought about the early days when I brought the car home. When I felt such excitement, I lost track of time. Now, every joy was overshadowed by tension and conflict. In rare peaceful moments, I still tried to keep my spirits up. I continued documenting every step of the restoration, taking photos, writing notes, keeping a journal. These rituals kept me connected to my passion, a lifeline between the chaos of real life and the order I craved in the garage. But no matter how hard I tried, I knew this situation couldn't last. One evening, sitting on a chair in the garage and watching the warm yellow light reflect off the car's body, I asked myself, will she ever understand? Or will I have to choose between my passion and our relationship? No answer came. The pressure only mounted. She began limiting the time I could spend in the garage, imposed rules about cleaning and organizing, even suggested I pay more attention to our life together than to that old car. Those words cut into my pride and perseverance like invisible blades. Another evening, I heard her soft laugh while I polished the drivetrain. You love that car more than me now, she said, half joking, half serious. But I knew it wasn't just a joke, it was a subtle accusation, a sign that the gap between us was widening. I tried to explain that every part, every bolt, every hour I spent had meaning. But she just shook her head. You don't get it, she said, walking away. I stood there, exhausted but resolute. I knew I couldn't give up the Impala over these conflicts. It was part of me, and I would protect it, no matter the cost. Time passed, the relationship grew tenser, but I kept striving for peace. I spent more time in the garage, where I could control everything. Outside, I practiced patience, but the more I restrained myself, the more tension accumulated. And like a calm before the storm, I sensed something looming, a turning point I couldn't predict. A test of passion, patience, and trust. A few months after the tension between her and me had started to build, I was still trying to maintain some sense of normalcy. The garage remained my sanctuary, the place where I could control everything, where my passion could breathe freely. I spent hours assembling engines, polishing the car body, cleaning every tiny detail with pride and total focus. Then one day, I had to go on a business trip for a few days for the local company I worked at. I tidied up temporarily, locked the garage, and left a note. "Everything is fine, don't touch anything." I trusted that she would respect my space, just as I had respected her hobbies and private areas. When I returned home, I immediately sensed something was different. The house was unusually quiet. The air didn't carry the daily tension, but it was heavy in a way I couldn't define. I walked into the kitchen and saw her smiling. She was cooking dinner, cleaning the house, and seemed full of energy to welcome me back. I smiled cautiously, thinking maybe she was just happy I was home. But then my eyes swept toward the garage, and my heart skipped a beat when I noticed one detail. My car was nowhere to be seen. "The car, where is it?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly, unable to believe what I was seeing. She smiled, her tone eerily calm. "Don't worry. Go check the garage." I walked to the garage door and opened it, and was struck speechless. No chassis, no body, nothing related to the Impala remained. Just an empty, cold space where my pride, my entire world, had once been. How is this possible?" I stammered, eyes wide, staring at her. "You'll see," she said, pointing to the empty space, a smile still on her lips, but her eyes cold. "Since you were gone, I took care of everything." I didn't understand. Took care of everything. I spent over a year, more than $11,000. Every bolt, every part. Where did it all go? She shrugged, as if I were being overly sensitive. "You're overreacting. It's just an old car." Chaos surged inside me. Half my body trembled, half tried to stay calm. My chest felt crushed as my mind raced through the image of over a year's worth of sweat and money gone in just a few hours. I stood there, speechless, feeling like everything around me had collapsed. "I can't believe this," I stammered. "I trusted you, I respected your space, and you. What did you do with my car?" She scoffed, a smile that sent chills down my spine. "You're taking this way too seriously. You think I would let a messy pile of stuff take over the garage forever? You were gone. Everything is neatly handled. You should thank me." Anger surged through me, desperation mixed with fury. I stormed into the garage, staring at the emptiness, imagining the chassis and body being hauled away, every part I had carefully removed, every bolt I had polished all gone. Everything I had built with my heart and time now existed only in memory. I shouted, my voice echoing through the house. "Are you crazy? This is my property. I won't let this go." She just shook her head, calm and indifferent. "You're overreacting. It's done. You should learn to let go." Despair flooded me. I stood there, staring at the cold, empty space, my eyes burning, my heart aching with every beat. At that moment, I knew the relationship had crossed its limits. I loved her, but I could not accept her destroying something so important to me. I decided this was over. Immediately, I demanded she pack up and leave. I knew I was furious, but I kept a sliver of calm to think about the next steps. This was not just a matter of feelings. It was a legal issue, a question of ownership and fairness. I collected all receipts, invoices, and photos of every part I had restored. I reviewed security footage from the garage and clearly saw her letting people in and moving everything out. I knew that if necessary, I had enough evidence to prove my ownership and the work I had invested. Her family and friends called, texted, even came to the house trying to convince me. It's just an old car, let it go. But I couldn't. This wasn't just a car. It was my passion, my devotion, the symbol of over a year of work and money. I felt compelled to fight for justice, no matter the pressure around me. In the following days, I met with a lawyer, presented the evidence, and prepared for a legal battle. I knew I was entering a fight, but my resolve was unshakable. I didn't just want the car back. I wanted everyone to recognize that such destructive behavior has consequences. Night after night, I sat in the empty house, staring at the vacant garage, picturing the Impala being taken away. Anger mixed with heartbreak, and despair gripped me tightly. Yet, I knew I could not give up. I had poured my heart into that Impala, and I would fight to reclaim it. Emotions surged, and I immediately contacted the police to report the incident, documenting everything, preparing for the legal battle ahead. Every camera image, every receipt, every tiny detail became a weapon to protect my dream. I realized that in this tragic moment, my passion, persistence, and determination would be the things to save me. After the shock of discovering my Impala had been taken, I fell into a state of chaos, but not total despair. I knew that if I only stayed angry, everything would pass, and I would lose both my passion and my effort. I needed to act, and the first step was legal preparation. The very next day, I called a lawyer recommended by a friend. As soon as I told my story, he leaned forward, listening intently to every detail. Invoices, receipts, photos of each restoration, step, security camera footage, and a list of purchased parts. When I finished, he looked at me and said something that made me both relieved and tense. "We have enough evidence to take this to court. This is clearly theft of property, and she won't be able to deny responsibility." My heart leaped. Finally, I was no longer powerless. I had found a way to seek justice. But at the same time, fear and worry about what might happen crept in. I would have to face her directly, her family and friends, and even the people she might have hired to move the car. Over the next few days, I organized everything meticulously. I arranged invoices chronologically, photographed each car part before it was taken, and logged every day of work. Every detail, every bolt, every component became crucial evidence. I realized that simply saying, "This is my car," wouldn't be enough. Everything had to be proven with clear images, documents, and data. Once everything was prepared, I confronted her. I noticed a change in her demeanor. The smile she once wore now carried a faint self-assurance, but her eyes hinted at something I didn't like. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, and said, "This ends now. I've collected all the evidence, and if you don't cooperate, I will take this to the authorities." She smirked, her tone defiant. "You're overreacting. It's just an old car. I can't return it. You should just forget it." Anger surged within me, but I held it in check. I can't forget. This isn't just a car, it's my work, money, and time. I will not let this go. After this tense confrontation, I decided not to stop at words. I went to the police station and reported the entire situation. The officer listened carefully as I explained every detail. One provided invoices, videos, photos, and a list of parts. They documented the incident and scheduled a follow-up to process the formal report. That first night after filing the report, I lay awake, my mind spinning. I recalled over a year of work on the Impala from the very first day I brought it home. Each chassis piece, every small bolt. I wondered if I could recover it all, or just part of it. But at least now, I was no longer powerless. There was a glimmer of hope, however fragile, enough to keep me believing. The next day, returning to the police station, the procedures moved quickly. They confirmed this was a case of grand theft and would begin the investigation immediately. I provided information about people she might have hired and even the name of the junkyard. I suspected the car had been taken to. Everything was now within a legal framework, and the chaos felt much more contained than in those first days. But the mental pressure remained. Her family and friends constantly called, texted, and tried to persuade me to drop it. They said I was ruining her life over an old car, that I was being extreme. Each word struck at my resolve, but it also strengthened my determination. They didn't understand the emotional value I placed on the Impala. They didn't know the pain of seeing over a year of work destroyed in a few hours. In the following days, I started contacting the junkyard I suspected. I sent them the car's information, including the VIN number, detailed photos, and asked them to confirm if it was there. Everything felt tense, as I didn't know if they would cooperate or if I'd have to take further steps to reclaim my property. Every evening, I returned to the empty garage, standing in the space that had once been my world. I looked at the bare walls, imagining each part being removed and taken elsewhere. The mix of anger and grief made it hard to breathe. Yet here, I also kindled a determination. I would get the Impala back, no matter how long it took or how many obstacles I faced. There was a moment when I asked myself, can passion and love for an object really be this strong? I realized that the Impala was more than a car, more than a project hit, was a piece of my soul. Giving up now would mean giving up part of myself. I couldn't do that. Finally, I began planning meticulously. Contact the police and provide all evidence. Reach out to the junkyard to verify the car's whereabouts. Prepare legal documentation ready to take the case to court if necessary. Log in detail everything that was lost, from chassis and body to all parts. Every step was carefully documented. I knew that in a property case, details were the most powerful weapon. Any oversight could cost me the chance to reclaim my car. In my mind, I could still see the Impala as it had been, each piece restored, each bolt polished. Each detail reminded me that this was not just a legal battle, but a fight to preserve my passion, my belief, and my dream. After finishing all the legal paperwork and preparing all my evidence, I knew the next step was to find out where my Impala was being held. I couldn't sleep at night. The image of my car disassembled, each part buried somewhere in a massive junkyard, haunted my mind. All I could tell myself was, I cannot lose it. Not now, not ever. I started contacting the junkyard I suspected directly, giving them the VIN number, detailed photos, and asking them to confirm. At first, they were evasive, avoiding a straight answer, making me feel like I was in a high-stakes game where every minute counted. But I didn't give up. I kept sending emails, making calls, recording every conversation, relentless to the point of obsession. I knew that every silence, every delay, made my heart race faster. Then one morning, finally, some good news came. A junkyard manager confirmed they had an Impala matching my description. Though they said they weren't sure about ownership, my heart raced. This was the first step, a flicker of hope in the midst of weeks of despair. I immediately contacted the police and gave them the new information. They scheduled a meeting at the junkyard to verify in person. Walking into that junkyard, the smell of oil, rust, and the metallic clang of machinery filled the air. But in my mind, there was only one goal: the Impala. We walked between rows of cars stacked high like mountains. I searched tirelessly through every chassis and body. Each glance sent my heart jumping. And finally, there it was, my Impala. Partially disassembled, but instantly recognizable. The chassis, the body, some engine components all stacked on a large pallet. I stepped forward, hands shaking, heart pounding. Seeing each piece, I could hardly believe my eyes. The car, though taken apart, was still my Impala. Each part reminded me of all the effort, every hour of work, and every dollar I had spent. It felt like I was reclaiming a piece of myself. The police began checking paperwork, verifying the VIN, comparing it with the receipts, photos, and videos I had prepared. Everything matched perfectly. I stood there silently, watching them take notes, feeling a mix of relief, excitement, and tension. Every time I looked at the chassis or the body, I could see years of care and sweat brought back to life. The junkyard manager tried to excuse themselves, claiming they didn't know the car belonged to me and had only received it from a third party. I knew they were dodging, but it didn't matter anymore. I had legal proof, and the police were right there. Everything was confirmed. My emotions were chaotic: relief, exhilaration, and anger at the sabotage. I exhaled deeply, closed my eyes, and reminded myself that the long road to bringing the car back to my garage was still ahead. But now, victory felt within reach. After verification, the police informed me that they would keep the car as evidence until the case was resolved, but assured me I would be the first to retrieve every part. At that moment, the relief I felt was indescribable. Standing in the junkyard, looking at each component, I thought, no one will destroy my work. I will restore every piece, and she will pay for what she did. Over the next days, I began planning carefully to bring each part back to my garage, inspecting the condition and preparing for the long restoration process. Every part I touched reminded me of the hours I spent in my garage, cleaning every bolt, carefully assembling each detail. I felt both nervous and determined. I knew the journey was far from over, but this time, I had faith. My Impala would return to me, whole, just like the passion and perseverance I had poured into it. The day I had been waiting for finally arrived. The police had arranged for me and the junkyard representatives to officially reclaim my 1967 Chevrolet Impala. I woke up earlier than usual, my heart hammering with a mix of anxiety, anticipation, and adrenaline. For more than a year, I had poured my blood, sweat, and money into this car, and now, finally, reality would meet my long-held obsession. The drive to the junkyard felt surreal. My mind oscillated between hope and fear. What if something had been damaged? What if parts were missing? I shook off the uneasy thoughts and focused on the mission, reclaiming every inch of my Impala. I pulled into the dusty lot, the morning sun glinting off rusted metal and towering piles of abandoned cars. And there it was, the Impala, lying on a large wooden pallet just as I had seen it last at the verification visit. But this time, law enforcement stood beside it to ensure everything went smoothly. My hands trembled as I stepped closer. Every panel, every chassis piece, every bolt and engine component was a fragment of my dedication, painstakingly collected over more than a year. The vehicle may have been partially disassembled, but to me it was whole, it was alive. Each part seemed to radiate my hours of labor, every night spent in the garage, every dollar spent restoring it to life. The junkyard manager tried his usual excuses, claiming ignorance of the car's origin, insisting that he had merely received it from a third party. I didn't respond. Instead, I handed over every receipt, every photograph, every video to the officers. My documentation was meticulous, a paper trail that could withstand scrutiny in court. The police meticulously examined the vehicle, cross-referencing VIN numbers with my records. One by one, every piece of evidence aligned perfectly, confirming my ownership beyond any doubt. When the officer finally announced that I could reclaim my Impala, I felt a surge of relief and triumph so intense it left me momentarily breathless. This wasn't just a car. It was a victory, a validation of my perseverance, a tangible result of all the legal wrangling, late nights, and emotional turmoil I had endured. It was a small but deeply satisfying triumph in what had been a grueling, heart-wrenching journey. The process of transporting the Impala back to my garage required careful planning. Every part had to be secured and protected against further damage. As I watched the movers handle each component, I couldn't help but think of her, the person who had sparked this entire ordeal. Anger and satisfaction intertwined. I knew, deep down, that justice was far from complete, and eventually she would have to answer for her actions. Finally, the car arrived at the garage. I stepped into the space I had always considered my sanctuary, once cluttered and chaotic, and now ready to host the resurrection of my dream car. One by one, the parts were placed in their rightful positions. The scent of oil, the faint metallic tampes of rust, the soft gleam of polished surfaces, all of it made me feel like I was reconnecting with a long-lost friend. The garage was alive again, not just with the vehicle, but with the culmination of countless hours of devotion and care. Yet, even as joy filled me, the confrontation with her loomed. This wasn't just about the car, it was about accountability, about ensuring she understood that her destructive actions had consequences. I contacted her, demanding a face-to-face discussion. She arrived, attempting a composed demeanor, though I could see the anxiety flicker behind her eyes. I didn't flinch. I looked her squarely in the eyes, my voice steady but commanding. "The car is back," I began, "but you need to understand that what you did is unacceptable. I have full documentation, and if necessary, everything can be brought to court. This isn't just about an old car anymore. It's destruction of property, and you need to take responsibility." For a moment, she remained silent, her usual smirk gone, replaced by a subtle shrug. "You're overreacting. It's done. You have your car back. That's enough." I felt a surge of heat rise within me, but this time I held it in. No shouting, no lashing out. Just calm authority, the kind that comes from knowing your ground is unshakable. "No," I said, voice low but firm. "You can't let this slide. I will see this through to justice, and I won't stop until it's resolved properly." She didn't respond further, turning to leave. Standing there, I felt a complex mix of tension and relief. The Impala was home, but just as important, I had asserted my boundaries and protected my passion and rights. In the following hours, I methodically began reassembling the Impala. Every bolt tightened, every chassis component restored. Each step reaffirmed my connection with the car and, symbolically, with my own perseverance. Every turn of the wrench, every adjustment, was a meditation, a reminder that dedication, patience, and love for one's craft could overcome disruption and betrayal. While restoring the car, I reflected on what this journey had taught me. It wasn't merely about possessing a vintage vehicle. It was about the principle behind it, the effort, commitment, and protection of one's hard-earned labor. It was about standing firm when challenged, about refusing to compromise one's values and passions. The garage, once a place of solitary work, had become a battleground of ethics, a proving ground for resilience, and a sanctuary for victory. As evening descended, the garage was bathed in the soft golden light of sunset filtering through the windows. The Impala gleamed, partially restored but radiating potential, every panel reflecting the effort and care it had received. I stood back, hands on hips, feeling the magnitude of what had been achieved. Triumph, relief, and determination swelled within me simultaneously. This day was not the end. Legal proceedings and full restoration would continue, and she had yet to face complete accountability. But in this moment, I had reclaimed more than a car. I had reclaimed control, pride, and the sanctity of my passion. The Impala's revival symbolized something larger, the victory of dedication over chaos, of law and reason over reckless destruction, and of personal resolve over external pressures. Every detail mattered. I documented each step of the reassembly, taking photos, noting serial numbers, and recording dates. The vehicle wasn't just being restored. It was being defended, piece by piece, against any future claims or disputes. I understood that to maintain ownership and integrity, vigilance was essential. The sense of empowerment was profound. For over a year, my dedication had been tested, emotionally, legally, and financially. And now, standing amidst the familiar sense of the garage, the hum of tools, and the soft gleam of metal, I felt a renewed connection to the work itself. The Impala was no longer just a car. It was a testament to perseverance, justice, and personal integrity. Looking at her departure, I knew one lesson was clear. Accountability was non-negotiable. One cannot let destruction or dishonesty go unchallenged. The confrontation had not just been a test of patience and self-control, but a declaration: I would fight for what mattered to me, and I would ensure that others understood the consequences of violating trust by nightfall. The garage was quiet but alive with possibility. Tools laid neatly on the benches, parts aligned with precision, and the Impala, partially restored, gleamed under the overhead lights. The smell of motor oil and metal filled the air, a scent I had come to associate with both labor and triumph. I stood there, a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration coursing through me. The car was back, yes, but more importantly, so was my sense of purpose. Part 6 ended with me standing in the garage, sunlight glinting off the freshly cleaned surfaces of the Impala, a tangible sense of revival and inner strength washing over me. This chapter was about more than reclaiming a car. It was a story of persistence, justice, and faith in one's passions. It set the stage for the next steps, completing the restoration of the Impala and seeing the legal battle through to its rightful conclusion. After the Impala returned to my garage, I spent the following days restoring the car down to the smallest detail. Every bolt, every engine part, every piece of the bodywork was carefully inspected, cleaned, and reassembled. This wasn't just a physical process, it was a mental one. Restoring the car meant restoring my faith, my perseverance, and my passion. The smell of motor oil, the metallic temps of steel, the way the light reflected off the car's panels, all of it brought back memories of the very first days I brought the Impala home. My heart raced with a mix of anticipation and excitement. I knew every hour, every ounce of effort I had put in over the past year was not wasted. Meanwhile, the legal case continued to progress. The police had gathered all the evidence from security camera footage and receipts for parts, to documentation confirming my ownership. The junkyard manager had to admit that they had no legal right to sell or dispose of the car, and the case was brought to court to determine accountability. One day, I received a call from my lawyer. He told me that she would be required to compensate for all damages, including the purchase price of the car, parts, services, and restoration costs. I exhaled, feeling a huge weight lift off my shoulders. This wasn't just a legal victory, it was a personal one as well. The person who had destroyed my hard work would finally be held responsible. Back in the garage, I continued reassembling the Impala, step by step. When the engine was finally installed, I sat down, took a deep breath, and felt an overwhelming sense of happiness. The Impala was alive again. I turned the key and heard the engine roar to life, a sound that seemed to sync with the beat of my own heart. Sitting there, I looked around the garage. Every part had been restored, every detail was in its proper place. This was the result of over a year of relentless effort, money, and dedication. I reminded myself that nothing could destroy passion and determination if you refused to let it. A week later, the court case concluded. She showed up, but she no longer carried the same confidence as before. The court confirmed that her actions constituted property destruction, and she was ordered to cover all the restoration costs. I didn't feel the satisfaction of revenge, felt justice had been served. It was the rightful outcome for everything I had endured. When the trial was over, I returned to the garage. Looking at the Impala felt like seeing an old friend I had thought I'd lost. I wiped off the dust, polished every metal surface, and stepped back, breathing in the freedom of the moment. Pride and peace coursed through me. Part 7 ends with the image of me standing in the garage. Sunlight glinting off the fully restored Impala, feeling happiness and justice fulfilled. I understood that even though life can throw unexpected shocks, if you stay steadfast, protect your passions and values, you can overcome anything. And the Impala born from hardship and challenges stood as a symbol of belief, perseverance, and personal triumph. After finally restoring the Impala and seeing the legal battle through to its conclusion, I thought I'd feel a sense of closure. But life isn't that simple. Over a year of relentless stress, anger and frustration had left its mark. And even with the car back and the court case settled, the emotional residue lingered. Some scars aren't visible on paper, they live in the corners of your mind. In quiet moments when the adrenaline fades, leaving raw awareness of what you endured. The first morning after the Impala's return, I stood in the garage, sunlight spilling across the polished hood, reflecting the care I had poured into every panel. I whispered to myself, "It's finally home." But the joy was tangled with unease. While the car had returned, my trust in people, especially those close, wasn't so easily mended. She, the one who'd destroyed months of my labor, was gone from my life, yet the shadow of betrayal remained. I spent the next few days slowly reacquainting myself with the space, the tools, and the rhythms that had become second nature over the past year. Each time I wiped the chrome trim or adjusted a bolt, it felt like therapy. The rev of the engine became a heartbeat for my own recovery. The Impala wasn't just metal and engine anymore. It had become a mirror of resilience and determination. Every reflection of sunlight on the car reminded me that I could rebuild not just machines, but confidence and balance in my life. I also began organizing the garage and surrounding property, cutting grass, arranging tools, and reclaiming order in the chaos. Small, mundane tasks became meditative, restoring a sense of control. I realized that emotional recovery requires more than legal justice, demands creating structure, cultivating calm, and finding rhythm in daily life. The space that had once been a battlefield of frustration and anger was slowly transforming into a sanctuary of peace and accomplishment. One morning, with sunlight streaming softly through the garage windows, I sat in my favorite chair, holding a steaming cup of coffee, and watched the Impala glisten in the warm light. For the first time in over a year, I felt a deep calm settle over me. The tension, the anger, and the exhaustion that had dominated so many months seemed to melt away. I knew I had learned something vital. Protecting your passion and maintaining your principles doesn't just secure justice, it restores inner balance. In the weeks that followed, I allowed myself to re-engage with life beyond the garage. I met friends for long talks and laughter, took walks across my property, and absorbed the quiet moments in nature. I began to understand that life isn't only about dedication to a project or obsession with a car, it's about balance, perspective, and nurturing resilience. Each calm evening, watching the sunset over the fields behind the garage, reinforced that recovery was not a single event, but a process. As I worked on the Impala, I took time to reflect on the lessons learned. Every meticulously restored bolt, every polished surface, every engine component brought back to life, symbolized more than skill. It represented patience, perseverance, and the courage to reclaim what had been unjustly taken. The Impala had become a metaphor for life itself. It could be broken, manipulated, or tampered with, but with dedication, care, and resolve, it could be restored stronger than before. The legal aftermath also reinforced this perspective. I had meticulously documented every part, every purchase, and every repair. Police reports, court testimonies, and the eventual ruling confirmed not only my ownership, but validated my insistence on responsibility and accountability. When my lawyer called to tell me she was legally obliged to compensate for the total cost of the car, parts, labor, and restoration, I felt an enormous weight lift. It wasn't about revenge. It was about justice being served. A tangible recognition of my hard work and integrity. In those quiet moments in the garage, I realized that this entire ordeal had strengthened more than just my hands-on mechanical skills. It had sharpened my sense of self, my resolve to defend what I value, and my understanding of how to navigate challenges with patience and dignity. Even when confronted with deceit and obstruction, I had maintained my focus, proving to myself that determination and adherence to principle matter more than quick gratification or fleeting anger. Some afternoons, I would step back and simply watch the Impala in the sunlight, every curve and contour catching light in a way that seemed almost alive. I'd run my hands along the hood, inhale the familiar scent of oil and metal, and feel a profound connection to all the hours spent pouring energy into the project. It wasn't just restoration, it was reclamation of self. The act of rebuilding something I loved had simultaneously mended parts of me I hadn't realized were fractured. I began integrating the Impala into my life beyond the garage. I took it for short drives down winding country roads, letting the engine's roar resonate with my own heartbeat. The hum of tires on asphalt, the wind brushing past, and the sun glinting off chrome brought a visceral joy that no courtroom victory could replicate. Here was a reminder that passion isn't only about work, it's about living fully in the moment, appreciating the fruits of diligence and perseverance. Evenings became reflective rituals. I'd sit with the garage doors open, listening to distant birds and the soft whir of the engine cooling, sipping coffee or a cold beer. These moments of quiet contemplation contrasted sharply with the stress of the previous year. I realized that reclaiming the Impala had also reclaimed a part of my mental and emotional equilibrium, a lesson in the importance of patience, resilience, and the quiet victories of persistence. Occasionally, memories of the conflict would surface, brief flashes of anger, disbelief, or frustration, but they no longer held power over me. Each time, I'd return to the present moment, appreciating the garage, the Impala, and the peace I had carved out with my own effort. The feeling of serenity was not passive. It was active, cultivated through sustained effort, reflection, and commitment to my values. Weeks passed, and with each day, the combination of restored vehicle and renewed personal equilibrium created a sense of continuity and completeness. I recognized that victory isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's in the quiet, the smell of clean oil, the orderly rows of tools, the steady hum of a reliable engine, and the ability to feel contentment without external validation. One afternoon, standing beneath the sprawling oak tree where I once imagined parking the car, I smiled and whispered to myself, I made it through. I kept the Impala. I kept myself. And most importantly, I've learned to protect what I value. The moment crystallized everything I had endured, the frustration, the late nights, the heartbreak, the triumph, and the gradual, patient return to peace. Part 8 closed with an image that would remain with me, standing between garage and open sky. The Impala gleaming beside me, feeling the slow, steady restoration of calm and equilibrium. This chapter was about more than a car or legal battles. It was about internal victory, the cultivation of resilience, and the quiet power of persistence. It reminded me that life, no matter the shocks it delivers, could be met with steadfast dedication to one's values and passions. And through that commitment, true balance and peace could be reclaimed. After more than a year and a half of relentless stress since I first bought my 1967 Impala, began disassembling it for restoration through the shock of having it taken from me, and a grueling legal battle finally had my car back. Standing in the garage, sunlight streaming through the windows and reflecting off the glossy paint, my heart raced with a mix of anticipation and sheer happiness. But this joy went deeper than simply reclaiming a car. It was about living my passion, proving to myself that I could overcome obstacles, and standing firm in my convictions. The first morning I drove the Impala after restoration, I woke up early. The dew still clung to the grass outside, but inside I felt a rush of light and energy. I turned the key and the engine roared to life, its rich, oily scent filling the garage. It was as if I had been transported back to the first days I brought the car home, that same sense of youthful excitement. I pulled to a shaded country road, breathed deeply, and just looked at the car. In that moment, I realized life and passion can always return from chaos if you don't give up. Over the next few days, I focused on reorganizing my personal space. I cleaned the garage, mowed the lawn, tended the garden, and arranged tools and parts neatly. These small, seemingly mundane tasks brought a surprising sense of calm and control. They reminded me that life isn't just about cars or legal victories. It's about caring for yourself, rebuilding balance, and reclaiming your world. I began journaling again, capturing every emotion from anger, despair, and stress to determination, perseverance, and ultimately joy. One afternoon, I invited a few close friends to the garage to see the Impala. As I shared the story from the very beginning, they were amazed by the persistence and dedication I had shown. One friend laughed and said, "You don't just love the car, you love your passion." I smiled and agreed, feeling a surge of pride. My happiness now wasn't just about owning a car, it was about inspiring others, sharing a story of perseverance and triumph. Still, the joy didn't erase every leftover shadow of stress. Trust in people, especially those close to me, remained fragile. She was gone, but the lessons lingered. I knew that keeping calm, managing my emotions, and focusing on the positive were key to regaining peace of mind. I spent even more time with the Impala, polishing every detail, inspecting the engine, and fine-tuning the suspension and steering. Every touch reminded me of the work, the money, and the love I had invested. Sitting behind the wheel, hands on the steering wheel, I felt like I had regained control of my life, my emotions, my passions, and the decisions that mattered most. One evening, I took the Impala for a long drive on a quiet country road, feeling the speed and freedom. The wind brushed past, the sun reflected off the shiny paint, and I laughed a real laugh from deep inside. I realized that joy doesn't just come from owning a car, it comes from overcoming challenges and staying true to what you love. In the weeks that followed, I documented the Impala's restoration in videos, notes, not just to preserve memories, but to share with the car community. Seeing others' reactions reminded me that personal experiences can inspire. Staying committed to your passion, facing obstacles head-on, and protecting your values are what truly matter. Day by day, every detail of the Impala became a symbol of perseverance. Every hour spent restoring it was a lesson in patience and inner strength. I gradually understood that no matter how many shocks life throws your way, if you hold on to your passion and faith in yourself, you can find joy and peace again. Part 9 closes with an image I will never forget. Driving the Impala down a sun-dappled road, trees lining the way, feeling the freedom, happiness, and serenity that had been hard-earned. It was a reward more than deserved, after months of tension, anger, and tireless effort. After all the intense months buying the 1967 Impala, restoring it, dealing with the shock of her taking it, and navigating the grueling legal process, everything finally seemed to settle. The Impala stood proudly in the garage, its glossy paint reflecting light, the lingering scent of oil and metal reminding me of the journey I had endured. But this time, peace didn't just come from reclaiming the car. It came from understanding my own worth, inner strength, and the quiet victory that not everyone can see. That morning, I woke to soft sunlight filtering through the windows. The air was fresh, birds singing, leaves rustling in the breeze. I stepped into the garage, touched the Impala, inhaled the mix of engine oil and faint wood from the floor, and smiled. Everything felt right. I checked the engine one more time, polished every detail, sipped my coffee, and sat back to look at the Impala as if gazing at a loyal friend who had stood by me. Through every challenge, throughout the restoration and legal ordeal, I realized that true peace doesn't come from victory or justice alone, comes from honoring your passions, recognizing your own worth, and appreciating life's simple moments. I started noticing little things more, the sunlight reflecting off the paint, the growl of the engine when started, the smoothness of the steering wheel, every bolt and metal detail, proof of the time, effort and passion invested. One afternoon, I decided to take the Impala out for a drive on a long, quiet country road. The speed was just right to feel the wind on my face, the sunlight glinting off the polished paint, the engine roaring beneath me. Everything combined to create an absolute sense of freedom. I smiled, breathed deeply, and realized that real joy doesn't come from material things. It comes from how we face and overcome adversity. During this time, I started blogging about my journey, sharing the restoration process, legal battle, and daily emotions. I wrote about anger, despair, tension, but also determination, perseverance, and eventually happiness. Feedback from the car community made me realize that a personal story can inspire others. Protecting your passion, facing challenges, and defending your values are achievements worth celebrating. Day by day, I cared for the Impala without stress or urgency. Every detail of the car became a testament to persistence, inner strength, and patience. I learned that life's beauty isn't just in the outcome, it's in the process of overcoming challenges. In the final weeks, I often sat in the garage with a cup of coffee, sunlight streaming across the paint, hearing the quiet hum of the garage and the insects outside. Everything felt peaceful, complete. One evening, as the sun set, I parked the Impala beneath a large tree, stepped outside, and breathed in the fresh air. I stood silently, watching the light reflect on the car, feeling serenity wash over me. The emotions I had carried, anger, despair, tension, were now only memories. I smiled, thinking, I've made it through everything, and now I am truly at peace. This story isn't just about restoring a car, it's about life. Lessons. Passion needs protection. Justice deserves pursuit, and inner strength is priceless. I realized that every challenge is an opportunity to grow, and every moment of peace after hardship is worth cherishing. In the following week, I shared my experience and lessons with the car community. I detailed every step of the restoration, every feeling, every lesson about perseverance and never giving up. The responses made me feel that part of this victory didn't just belong to MIT, extended to others as well. One morning, I stood before the Impala, sunlight streaming through the glass, bouncing off the glossy paint. I thought back to all the stressful, angry, relentless days, and I realized that peace and happiness don't come from perfection, they come from valuing what you've done, overcoming challenges, and keeping faith in yourself day by day. Life became calmer and more meaningful. I no longer focused on judgments, losses, or past disputes. Instead, I focused on what mattered: health, passion, enjoying every moment, and inner peace. The Impala was no longer just a car, it was a symbol of all those values: passion, justice, determination, and living fully. The story ends with me standing under the sunset, the Impala shining beside me, a gentle smile on my face, feeling peace spread through me. I knew that all the stress, anger, and effort had been rewarded with freedom, happiness, and inner fulfillment. This wasn't just the end of a car, it was a journey of passion, justice, inner strength, and living life fully.